Show me your heart. I know that it's beating. Tell me that you love me too. So I know your heart is true. 'Cause I need some proof of love. 'Cause I need some proof of love. 'Cause I need some proof of love.
Hello everybody and welcome to Proof of Love. I'm here with Veronica Toro and this is the first Proof of Love I've done in a really long time. We're going to get to her Olympian career, which is going to be fun. But I wanted to set it up for you guys. So you've probably never seen me in such a beautiful location doing a Proof of Love. That's because I just moved to Miami. I'm sure you've seen on some of my socials, on Twitter or whatever, that I've been moving for quite a while. And so that's why I haven't been doing any shows. But we were hanging out the other day. It was Bitcoin Pizza Day, right? So I haven't been going out much, but Miami has a lot to offer. So I had to say yes to a bunch of pizza and maybe a little bit of wine. So it was really cool. We got to meet across the table. And so Veronica is crossing over a little bit into the crypto world. And, I'm not the most sporty person, but she clearly is. And I wanted to learn a little bit more about, what personal skills do you need to develop in order to have the mindset of an Olympian competitor, right? So thank you very much for joining us on this show today. I'm excited to learn all about what you're doing, and also you're doing an NFT thing, so we'll tease that for the end. But thanks again for coming on.
Yeah, thank you for the invitation.
All right, so tell us a little bit about your background. So you're from Puerto Rico, and you're a rower.
Yes.
Okay, so give us the story.
Okay, so I was born and raised in San Juan, Puerto Rico. I grew up there until I graduated from high school, and I actually had never seen a rowing boat.
Oh, really?
No. So rowing is not very big in Puerto Rico, and it wasn't until I moved to Boston in 2012 to go to college. So I went to MIT, and that's where I picked up rowing.
Wow.
So I started when I was 18. And the reason I ended up with rowing, I feel like it's kind of this thing where like it kind of picked me rather than me picking it. I was
Sounds
looking,
like it.
yeah, I practiced sports like kind of as a hobby all my life. I feel like I was really always an academic person.
Mm-hmm.
Funny story, I actually did math Olympics growing up, not any
wow.
sports Olympics. And so I don't know, I did some volleyball and softball in high school. I had tried other sports when I was growing up because I have a brother who's like almost my twin.
Mm-hmm.
And he did a bunch of sports. And so when I went to MIT, I wanted to keep being active. But the position I had played in volleyball back in Puerto Rico, I was too short for. Coming to the US, I'm like really tall back home, but like not so tall to play volleyball in like middle blocker position here. So I was looking out for like new thing to try, and a teaching assistant actually from a summer program I did right before my freshman year recommended I try rowing. And so
Wow.
I showed up.
It's good for your back,
Yeah, I showed up. Oh, that's good that you mentioned that. So a lot of people, when I tell them I row, they're like, oh, that's why your arms, whatever, right? But like something that a lot of people know unless they row is that the main muscle that you use in rowing are your legs.
Really?
Yes. And this is...
They look strong.
Yes. And this is because when you're sitting in a rowing boat and you're rowing backwards, which is something I didn't realize until I got in the boat, you're actually in a seat that moves back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
So when you go all the way front and like you're compressing your legs, it's almost like sitting on a leg press.
Oh, yeah.
So it's
I
like-
like the leg press. That's an okay activity. So
So you
Not
kind
that
of do
many
a leg
times.
press every stroke before you pull with your arms, right? And so you end up using your legs a lot. I think probably that's part of the reason why I could transition from like jumping a lot in volleyball to rowing. But I think why I stayed, it was kind of like the proximity to the water. Like being from an island, I used to go to the beach like every weekend and all of that. And coming to MIT, the river was like right there on campus. And I think, the ability to like go out in nature, like, and not just be in the city all the time, like every day during practice, that was kind of like something that I really appreciated during my
Right.
time there.
Okay, cool. So wait, what were you doing at MIT?
So I studied biological engineering at MIT. That's what I studied.
Wow. Okay. So you're doing some rowing stuff, and then did you continue on to further schooling, or when did you transition into competing professionally with rowing?
So I feel like there was never there was kind of a transition at some point, but it kind of like it was all like blended in. So I rowed my freshman year in college, and after my freshman year, I went back to Puerto Rico for the summer, and I found a news article that they were looking for like people for the Puerto Rico Rowing Federation. So I showed up to practice, and like back in the time, there was a national team coach with a team's like a selection team over there. They were all guys. But I don't know. I was there for the summer. I was doing some sort of like medical internship in Puerto Rico because I then went ahead and like went into med school, but we'll get into that. And I don't know. I really liked training with them. I would train with them twice a day, and so
Twice a day?
Yeah, because they were like they were in the national teams. That's when I first started training twice a day. You know, I didn't know that in college because like we weren't doing that. But it was also the transition where like in college I was rowing the boats with 8 people or 4 people, and this is like the rowing that usually shows up if it's in movies or something, where it's like each person has just one oar and they go on one side versus the other. Versus when I was in Puerto Rico, I had to learn how to row a boat by myself, called the single. And so in that you use 2 oars because otherwise you would go in circles, right? So I tried that. I flipped a bunch of times, but eventually I caught on, and I liked it. And it was there that they started talking to me about potentially representing Puerto Rico in different international competitions.
Sure.
And so this was in the summer of 2013, and then I kind of like, I like this idea. And then in 2014, I actually went to my first competition representing Puerto Rico.
Wow, okay.
So
it's been a while. You've been doing this for a long time. You look very young.
Yes, I have. So in 2014 is that I started competing for Puerto Rico. And at the same time, so I started at MIT 2012. So I'm still like halfway through MIT, and so I'm competing with MIT in the big boats, and then for Puerto Rico in the small boats.
Oh, wow.
So that meant that I had to do some extra training. So I practiced with the team in the morning, and then in the afternoons, I kind of like caught on by myself. Like I kind of like practiced by myself in the single for many years. And I would go to camps here and there for like 1 or 2 weeks, like if Puerto Rico would send me, or like summer of 2015, I trained with a high performance group in Boston, in one of the clubs over there. So I kind of did this like kind of gypsy thing with my single, where I like trained with a bunch of different coaches versus like in the bigger boat, I had like the same coach every day for like all the time that I was at MIT. So
is a coach that important? I mean, like, isn't it just like, you go like this, and I'm not trying to be a jerk, but seriously, like,
So, I feel like the smaller the boat, the more you need the coach.
Oh, really?
Especially in the single. Like, technique is so important because you need to be so efficient, I mean, all the boat classes from 8 people to 1 person, you all row the same distance, which is 2 kilometers. So we're talking about, it's the same distance, but, a boat of 8 people with 8 guys sitting on it finishes in like 5 minutes versus like a woman in a single takes like 7.5 minutes, so it's like a completely different ballgame, right? But you need to be as efficient as possible the smaller the boat is, because when it's a bigger boat, you kind of just keep the speed up. But when you're in a smaller boat, the water kind of drags you every stroke. So it's really important to have like good technique the smaller the boat is. I feel like when you're in a bigger boat, a lot of, especially in college, a lot of people just like jump at it, and they just pull as hard as they can, and they kind of do some technical stuff, but the coach is like super important, especially when you get to this like elite level. You don't want to be like coming up with your own training plan. You want someone who's like checking you all the time and correcting like the bad habits you pick up. So I picked up a bunch of bad habits when I was doing this on my own. And so jumping ahead to like 2016, which was the last time they had the Olympics, I actually tried qualifying then.
Oh,
but
okay.
I was like, that was my last year at MIT. I was also applying into medical school.
Wow. You're an ambitious lady.
And I tried to qualify for the Olympics after like 3 years of rowing. So I didn't make it. But it wasn't by much, actually. The girl who beat me was the last one to qualify from the like continental qualification regatta that I went to. And okay, from then on I was like, okay, if I really want to do this next time, I need to train like just in the single, you know, because I was training still in the 8 with MIT and we got a medal that year and everything. So I was like, no, I need to transition to only do the single. But at the same time I was moving to California to go to medical school at Stanford. So there I did some like gypsy training again for a little bit until I ended up training with another high performance group up there in Oakland. It was called the California Rowing Club, and so I trained there even with the woman who's gonna go represent the United States in my event. You know, this Olympics. So I trained with a bunch of people who are like in the U.S. national team. Some of them going to the Olympics, but. You know, we were unfortunate enough that, like, in 2017, they had to shut down the program because it was fully funded by this very generous man, and he passed away, and his family closed the program.
Oh, that's
so
unfortunate.
we all had to, like, disperse, and so that's how I ended up in Miami.
Oh, okay.
So,
full circle.
Exactly. So I ended up in Miami. So I finished my second year of medical school in, like, April 2018, and that's when I make the move here. Because, you know, third and fourth year of medical school are not in the classroom anymore. You kind of have to, like, go work in the hospital. And that was kind of, like, a no-no with, like, the training that I required. You know, I managed to, like, wake up at 5 in the morning and, like, go train before going to school and then get out of school and train again.
Wow.
I did that for 2 years. But once you go to the hospital, you're taking care of patients. You don't want to feel like you have to run out the door. And, like, you have to be at the hospital at 6 in the morning. So there's no way, you know, that you can fit that all in. And so I put a hold on, like, my medical school studies. I picked up...
Wait, were your parents annoyed? Were they like, what's going on here?
Yes.
What, are you going to have a rowing career?
You know, yeah, so the interesting thing is there's no doctors or high-performance athletes in my family. And I had always been this, like, really good student, right? So they're like, oh, my God. First, you pick a career that's going to take you forever to finish. And then you stop and you go row.
Yeah.
So, you know, yes, that's interesting that you ask. But, like, obviously, they were like, what are you doing? You know, I feel like, especially my grandma. Like, you know,
grandmas are not going to understand your rowing dreams.
Yeah, like, now she's, like, totally on it and whatever. Like, now that I've qualified to the Olympics and, like, everything's working out, you know, everyone supports you once you already make it, right?
I know that feeling.
But, yeah, it was an interesting transition, you know? And even for myself, you know, I kind of felt like moving from, like, always running from one place to the other and, like, trying to do everything at the same time to actually having the time to, like, recover in between practices and, like, do things right, you know, like, was a big transition for me, you know. Now I'm used to it because I've been doing it for, you know, more than I would have planned at the beginning because the Olympics got pushed the whole year, right? But it's really been a time not just like to develop in rowing, but I feel like it's also been a time for like personal growth and development, you know?
Sure.
I moved to Miami when I was 23. I feel like it's kind of like a little shithead at the time, you know, because I had been on this like roller coaster of trying to like do all these things and be a good student and row and do all this stuff that I didn't really have the time to like sit and like, you know, think about what is it that I want to do? What are like my most important like values or goals and like, you know, like just have the time to like think, meet people.
Yeah,
like,
have a life.
Yeah, have a life. And like, you know, like all the traveling that I've done competing, also like meet people from different countries, different points of view, different cultures, you know, because growing up in Puerto Rico, I went to a Catholic school. It was an all-girls Catholic school, you know, so there is like a one point of view there, you know? And so like ever since I like started traveling and stuff, you know, like you get exposed to like so many cultures, you know. I've had roommates who can't even like, I can't even communicate with them. Like I had a roommate once from Indonesia and like I speak 4 languages and I couldn't speak any of the languages that she spoke, you know. And like I've had roommates from like Algeria, Namibia, which I didn't even know was a country, Singapore, you know. It's it's been a great, like, adventure, I feel like. And it's kind of sad that it's kind of, like, coming to an end with the Olympics. But I'm, like, obviously super excited because that was the end goal.
Yeah, but then you can come back to Miami and hang out. Or are you going to relocate back to Miami, or what's the plan right now?
So, the plan right now is to go to the Olympics, and then I'll be here, like, to come get my car. But, like,
Okay.
I am relocating back in California because I do have to finish my medical school
Oh,
degree.
yeah, that's a good idea.
Yes.
We didn't get to that. Oh, well, I'm glad that you're sticking with it. So, okay, the Olympics, I don't know. I'm not the most sporty person. So I'm not like, I don't really follow the Olympics that well. But they were supposed to have it in Japan, but then COVID happened, and now they're doing it again. And so how long is the competition? Are you guys going to have to wear masks while you're rowing? Like, what's the story?
Yeah, so you're
You're
right.
going to die while that happens. Sorry, I don't mean to insert mask, like, fighting into it or whatever. But that would seem really difficult if you're a high-performance athlete to have to do that. Like, do you think it'll still be fun? Do you feel like you're getting a little gypped on the Olympic experience, or you're getting the unique one, so it's okay?
It's a, I don't know what the answer to that's going to be, but it's definitely going to be a different Olympics from any other Olympics. It will be a historical Olympics. I think, they're stealing from us the fact that we can't have, like, international spectators. So,
Right.
I won't know any of the people watching me. We don't even know if the Japanese people will actually show up because, like, polls are that, like, 85% of the Japanese people don't even want the Olympics to happen. So I'm just wondering if the stadiums are going to be empty, because if they're the only ones that are allowed and
No,
they're against
they're not going
it,
to make the Olympics empty.
I don't
Come
know.
on.
Well, I mean, obviously we'll have
Go
like
put
the
cardboard
biggest,
people.
we'll have the biggest like show on TV, right?
Mhm.
But like, who knows what'll happen in person? But I know the last notice I received is that we're gonna get tested every day.
Oh, that sounds wonderful.
Yeah, so they're gonna put the swab up our nose every day.
Oh, I'm not a fan of the swab. I wish that there was maybe more, because the thing that with the swab is that they can hurt you with it if they don't do it properly. Like, I've heard like scary stories about that. And also the inventor of the PCR test said that it's not even appropriate to use his test for coronavirus testing anyway. So it's a weird kind of situation. But I mean, you got to do what you got to do. It's the Olympics. You're not gonna tell them. Excuse me, I'm not really sure that these tests are accurate. Have you heard about the origins of anything? Like, no, nobody's looking to get into
exactly.
that. And that'll be cool though. Like, you will probably still have fun vibes and just a whole different environment, Corona aside.
Yeah.
I mean, what an incredible experience. What are you looking forward to most? Like, do you think you're going to win? Or do you think, like, what are you, like, making new friends? Watching people and competing with them? Like, what are you looking forward to most?
I feel like I'm super excited that rowing finally is, like, in the center of it all. Because
Why? I never heard that.
Well, because that it's within the Olympic Village and everything, because usually they have sub-sites for the Olympics, and, like, some sports can't be held in the main city. And so that often happens with, like, rowing.
Right.
So they'll send you somewhere else, and it feels just like you're just in a rowing competition because there's no other sports happening. But, I'm super excited that, like, the rowing venue is, like, in the middle of Tokyo, and, like, we're going to be with the rest of the athletes, because, like, that's part of the fun, like, you don't just see the same rowing people that you always see when you go to the World Rowing Championships, but, like, you get to, like, meet other people from your own delegation. So, like, I get to meet the other Olympic athletes from Puerto Rico, and, like, you get to meet athletes from, like, all over the world, So, like, not just rowers, but, like, other kinds of athletes, and I don't know if they're gonna let us go watch other people, but that was definitely like one of the funnest things of like the Central American Caribbean Games I went to in 2014, which was the last time I went to a games where rowing was not 2 hours away from everything else, and I really enjoyed going to watch like the volleyball games and the basketball games and the boxing matches. I don't know how that's going to work this time. So I think...
Yeah, I think that they're probably going to let you guys, because, I mean, you're not just there to row and leave, right? You're there to participate in that community.
Yeah.
And also the nice thing about the Olympics that I do admire, particularly, is it's it's the international aspect of it, right? Like, there's no politics. I mean, there's always politics, right? But for the most part, it's just interacting with people with different backgrounds, sort of how you were talking about it. So that should be really neat. Are there any countries that are saying, we're not going to the Olympics this year, or is everybody just going anyway?
I haven't heard of anyone who has like a strong feeling against going. I think there's been delegations that like clearly established like, you know, our athletes are all getting vaccinated in order to go, you know, and like they've kind of like told their athletes that they must get vaccinated, which is something that like the Olympic Committee can't do, but like I guess every delegation has its own rules.
Wow, that's kind of a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
Like some people maybe already got COVID, so they might not even want to do that because they say it's like dangerous in those cases. But
I mean, the U.S. is not one of those. But like,
really?
I don't think they're forcing people, but like, you know, I feel like there are some countries who are like strongly. I mean, I guess if you have like
Russia, they're gonna make you do it.
Yeah, I feel like if you have a religious background or something that like doesn't allow you to, you could probably ask for an exemption. But like, I think what I've heard is like some countries like, you know, like they really want all their athletes because they don't want the people coming back to the country infected, right?
Right, sure.
So, I think that's mostly what they're like concerned about, you know, like them getting sick and then bringing the whole delegation back.
It's a lot of weird liabilities around it. Like, are you supposed to make them get it, not make them get it? What if then people start getting corona, then it's your fault? So that's a complicated thing.
Yeah.
But now, you know this guy Enrique that I know too.
Yes.
And he did something really unique around your going to the Olympics, right?
Yeah.
Like we're bringing it back to crypto here on Proof of Love. So what is going on? You have an NFT? Like, what's happening?
Yeah, so he kind of like, he's Puerto Rican and like he partnered with me. He really wanted to help me because I'm I don't know if you've mentioned it, but like I'm the first female to ever qualify in rowing for Puerto Rico in the Olympics, and so like he thought my story was cool and whatever.
It's
you
cool.
know, and he you know, he works with NFTs and athletes, and he was like, you know, we should make like NFTs. So I am completely new to this crypto and NFT world, but like I feel like the conversation went like, you know, like just give me things that people like could see as like collectibles, you know. So I have things turned into NFTs like the uniform I used when I qualified to the Olympics, or like the rowing oar that I used when I qualified to the Olympics. So there's things that are kind of like collectibles. Yeah, and so that's what we've turned into NFTs. I think there's like 5 of them on my page. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So let's give it a quick plug because we're going to link to all this information in the show notes. But tell people who are just listening, maybe they're driving, where can they go to find out more about you?
So my website is Verotoro, so VEROTORO.com, and there you can find like what's it called, the link to the NFTs. You can find the link to my Instagram or like to my LinkedIn. You can find I also have a GoFundMe page.
Yeah, everybody, are you inspired by this story? Like, help her go. $5, $10, $100. A Bitcoin or
anything.
Yeah,
anything is really appreciated, and like the funding all goes towards the training that we're doing since I qualified for the Olympics in March all the way until the Olympics. So I'm actually leaving tomorrow to go to Italy, and we're doing a base training camp there, and we're also competing at the Third World Rowing Cup, which is the next weekend, June 4 to 6. So these funds are all to cover the cost of all of that traveling and training, and to obviously pay my coach because like he's full-time training me and the guy who's going to row for Peru, and we need to appreciate what he does for us, you know.
Right, for sure.
Yeah, and so anything really is appreciated.
Very cool. So are you allowed to get sponsors? Like if there's a crypto company that was like, this seems cool, or is that not allowed in the Olympics?
So I can have sponsors.
Okay.
I can't have sponsors like on my uniform. I can have sponsors, and there's specific rules about how we can go about like if they wanted to create a campaign or something. Like there's very specific ways to go about it, but we can have sponsors. Is our answer. So
cool. Yeah, because
you can email me if you feel like sponsoring me. You know, my email is vtoro@stanford.edu. So.
All right, you got yourself a Stanford girl mixed with a rowing champ. Wow, so that's really neat. Where else, like, what else should we talk about? Because we're coming up to the end of the show, but I want to give you a chance. Is there anything else that you want to maybe say to encourage people? Like, everybody's not going to become a rower in the Olympics, but everybody can really change their lifestyle. And here people are talking about health. Like, we talk about that on the show. Your story's cool. But sometimes I think there's a little bit of a lack of motivation. It doesn't seem like a problem for you. So tell us, like, what do you think is, like, the best way that people can get started in some kind of physical activity or following some kind of dream that they, you know, maybe always had in the back of their mind?
You know, I think the strongest thing for motivation, and like that has definitely like been made even clearer to me throughout this whole COVID pandemic, is to have a clear goal. You know, to pick a goal of something that you want to do, and it can be modifiable. But I've always been a very like goal oriented person. You know, and you know, you pick a goal, you trace a plan. And your plan has to be adaptable, because there's always going to be like world circumstances, you know, like I never thought there was going to be a pandemic, but like there is things as pandemics that can change your plan, and you have to be adaptable. But I think if you have a clear objective, it doesn't matter what's going on around you. You will always find your own path, you know, your own path to make it work to that objective. So if that objective is to start like working out, like pick an activity that you want to learn and be like, you know, like I feel like and to have a deadline is really good, you know, like to be like, oh, by X date I would like to have learned to do this, or by X date I would like to have walked this much, or whatever, you know, like I think
what are small goals? Like, is that important? Like little incremental ones, because that could be, you know, helpful too. I think maybe discipline on a daily basis is important.
So like you want to have like your end goal, and then you place more like short-term goals of like, you know, I want to do this like this many times a week, and maybe like, you know, like reward yourself somehow if you do those things. And another way to do it is also definitely getting someone else involved, you know. So here I've been training, and there was a whole pandemic, but I was so lucky that there was a rower from Peru that came to train with us, you know. So it hasn't been just me, it's been me and it's been him, you know, and we kind of push each other, like, you know, because like sometimes I don't feel like it's the best day, sometimes he doesn't feel like it's the best day, but we're always there, and we always have to race each other, you know. So I feel like having some sort of accountability, you know, like that definitely helps with motivation, you know, because I feel, so I learned this from like another Olympic rower that was like, you know, there's days when especially when you're doing something by yourself, she was like, you know, there's days in your training where you just show up. The only thing you do is show up. There's days where you show up and you do the right volume, and then there's days where you show up and you do the right volume and the right intensity, you know. But like there's days that you just show up, and showing up counts, you know. Like even if you don't feel like doing the thing, like you went to the club and like, I don't know, you like tried, you know, like you did like shorter workout or shorter whatever it is that you wanted to do, but like you showed up. You're like, oh, I need to send like 10 emails or something to give a non like athletic environment, you know, like, but if you at least like log into your computer and send one, like you at least tried. Because I feel like something that I've learned from sports is that once you get started, like I feel like the highest like barrier is getting started.
Yeah, I think so too. That's why whenever I try workout routines, like they're never that intense, but I like the slow and steady wins the race. I mean, I could stand to get a little bit more ripped, but like I do think that having a daily practice is important. So I don't know. Now that I'm kind of a little bit more settled in, I'm going to try and take some of that advice myself.
Yeah. I think it's just like, you know, like if you just show up, then the rest becomes easier, you know, like even in my hard workouts, I'm like, once I start, I'm like, oh, it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be, you know, but like the getting started is like
a little bit tricky.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, verotoro.com, VEROTORO. Go over there. Please support the GoFundMe campaign. And when are we going to watch you on the Olympics? Like, when does that happen?
Yeah, so the rowing competition is scheduled from July 23rd to July 30th.
Wow, so you're gone for like 3 months.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Very nice. Well, I hope you win, and if you don't, you're still winning because you're at the Olympics and hanging out with amazing people, getting to see Tokyo. I wonder if it's going to be cool. I've heard Tokyo is really quite nice.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
I'm like sad they won't let us tour around, but
They won't?
I don't think so. They're not allowing tourists in during the Olympics, like any tourists to come in during the Olympics, because they really want to make sure there's no international spectators.
Jeez, that's a bummer.
Yeah.
Well,
I guess
whatever.
I'll have to go back to Tokyo some other time.
That's a good idea. All right, thanks everybody for watching Proof of Love. We'll have some new episodes out for you with this beautiful background. We'll see if we can figure out. I'm pretty sure the lighting's messed up, but you guys will hopefully forgive us. Share this show, like it on Spotify, on Apple. We're on all these platforms and stuff, but we really can't do this without your support, so please share it. And also share her story. I think this is super cool. Thanks again for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Bye, everybody. Thanks for watching Proof of Love.
Do you like cryptocurrency, politics, economics, activism, or art? Then check out The Tatiana Show, where you can learn all about it in a fun and non-intimidating way, as if you're just hanging with friends. Go to thetatianashow.com and listen now. Proof of Love has been brought to you by CryptoMediaHub.com, a boutique marketing and PR agency for Bitcoin and beyond.
Show me your heart. I know that it's beating. Tell me that you love me too. So I know your heart is true. 'Cause I need some proof of love. 'Cause I need some proof of love. 'Cause I need some proof of love.
Thank you for listening to Proof of Love. Please follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Proof of Lovecast. More episodes can be found at proofoflovecast.com. And make sure you leave a review on iTunes and tell your friends. You are listening to Proof of Love with Tatiana Moroz and Lauren Kasovitz. This show may contain adult content, language, and humor and is intended for mature audiences. If that's not you, please stop listening. Nothing you hear on Proof of Love is intended as financial advice, legal advice, therapy, or really anything other than entertainment. Please take everything that you hear with a grain of salt. Oh, and if you're hearing us on an affiliate network, the ideas and views expressed on this show are not necessarily those of the network that you're listening on, or of any of the sponsors or affiliate products that you may hear about on the show.